Hey, I'm Aaron from Nomadic Sound, and you're watching the final episode of the Songwriter's Next Steps project. In this 4-part series, we took the original song Letting You Go by pop artist Danzy through every step of the production process. In the first 3 videos, we discussed what the song will sound like, we recorded scratch tracks to give us the foundation of the song, we composed an instrumental and discussed the arrangement, we recorded the main vocal line as well as harmony tracks at Dance Studio, and now I'll show you how I handle these vocals. Okay, so the first step to editing these vocals is listening back to all of the recordings from our session, and then I'm going to take some notes on which parts I like. Then I'll piece the audio together using clips that work best with each other. One of my goals here is to keep the audio in longer sections so that they sound more natural and they flow better. If I chop the recordings up too small and use a piece from this take and a piece from this take, it's going to start to sound weird and the parts are going to sound very different. Another thing to keep in mind is that we're listening for something emotional and intriguing with these vocal performances. So if we hit a point where I'm torn between 2 vocals, one of them is sang perfectly in tune, hitting every note, and then the second vocal line, maybe there's like a few flat notes, but it's super emotional and super intriguing, I'm definitely going with the second vocal take. I'll use the lovely pitch correction tool that my DAW provides and fix the take up. When I'm going through the song and piecing all of these clips together, I need to make sure the parts flow into each other nicely. And my best friend here is the crossfade function, found in every DAW. Let's listen to how these 2 parts go together.
Don't want you around just to bring me down.
These takes work really well together, except for this part right here. There's a breath where the takes are joining. So I'm just gonna slide this over a little bit this way, and this one can come over as well. And I want to crossfade when the wave is at the lowest amplitude possible, meaning like there is no sound happening on either take. So somewhere in this area is good. And I'm just gonna highlight these 2, and on Cubase, I will hit X to crossfade. And sometimes you need to adjust how long the crossfade happens. Sometimes a real quick, short crossfade can work just fine. Other times, a bit longer seems to work better. Just play around with it, find what works. It's these subtle nuances that make the vocal line sound real and lively and unedited. I make my way through the entire song, piecing these clips of audio together to create the main vocal line, and then that's it for this step. I'll do the same thing with the harmony tracks, and then we'll continue processing the vocals. The next step I'll take with these vocals is tuning. And in this case, Dan and I have already discussed how we want the vocals to sound in the end, and we don't want them to sound tuned, meaning I'm going to do as little as possible. Nothing fancy here, just nudging the odd, slightly flat note up a little bit here and there, and vice versa. Dan sang the song really well, so my job here is super easy. Okay, now for the fun part. I can process these vocals and add effects and make them sound huge. So the first thing I did is start with some EQ, compression, and saturation just to make the vocals sit nicely. And I'm not gonna go into too much detail here. I'm not gonna show you guys settings on this thing because it is very different for every recording that you do. What I will show you though is the reverbs that I've used and why I've used them. This is what the first verse sounds like with no effects.
It's hard to even begin this. Never was my intention, and I'm scared that when you listen, you'll find flaws in my contention.
And I'll just solo that vocal for a second.
It's hard to even begin this. Never was my intention, and I'm...
Okay, and then I'll show you the first effect I've used here is a plate reverb just to make it sound a little bit bigger. I'll start with it off and then I'll kick it in.
It's hard to even begin this. Never was my intention, and I'm scared that when you listen...
It's just adding a tiny little bit at the end of the phrases. Like when she's not singing, you can start to hear the reverb just a little bit. I've got another reverb down here doing the exact same thing. It's just a different reverb. It's got a bit of a different color to it. And I find sometimes stacking reverbs can give you a bit of a denser, more lush sound. So we'll listen just with that first verb enabled, and then I'll kick in the second one.
It's hard to even begin this. Never was my intention, and I'm scared that when you listen, you'll find flaws in my contention. But
it's got a bit of a deeper sound to it. I can start to hear a little more depth with the vocal. That leaves us with this third and final reverb here. It is an automation plate is what I've called it. So I'll leave that enabled. And like the track says, it is automation. So here's my send to level. So this reverb just kicks in when I want it to. And let's have a listen and see what it's doing.
But your girl can only take so much, so rather than just put you on silent, maybe I should try to explain the way that I've been recently.
So why have I chosen to bump just those words? Well, it's simple. We decided to sing harmony over these lines.
But your girl can only take so much, so rather than just put you on silent, maybe I should try to explain the way.
That harmony track also has a big plate reverb on it with a big long tail, and I just found that automating these words on the main vocal line really made those two tracks sit well together. Once I had a good sounding vocal for the first verse, I duplicated that track and then just used the exact same settings for my pre-chorus. Now, the only difference here is that I've used slightly different reverb settings on the pre-chorus just to give it a bit of a different sound, and that sounds like this.
But that don't mean it hurts any less. So I guess trying to find the words to say, trying to find the best way to let you go.
You could hear it just got a little bit brighter and slightly more ambient. This brings us to the chorus, and I've done the exact same thing here. I've copied my settings from that first verse onto the chorus channel, and now I've adjusted my effects again, so my reverbs sound quite different, and I've added one more thing, and that's a delay channel here, so just an echo. And we can see here, I've got a lot of automation happening. This is mostly, what do we have? 2 reverb channels automating for the same intentions as that pre-chorus and verse 1. Just kind of highlighting certain notes, letting them ring out a little bit longer. But the other thing I've done is automate this delay channel here. And I just want the delay to kick in after certain words. When there's a lot of space between the vocal lines, we'll just let the delay carry those notes out. So here's what that sounds like.
I'm letting you know, I'm letting you go. I'm letting you know, I'm letting you go.
So that delay channel is really giving us a lot more space, making the vocals sound super exciting. And something else I've done with that delay channel, I've got the main vocal line here on this chorus channel. That's being sent to one of these reverbs. And then I've got my delay happening, but the delay is also being sent to the reverb. So every time the delay goes off, it's also going through that reverb channel, giving it even more of a sense of space. This is the very last chorus. The chorus is mixed basically the same as it has been the entire song, but to make it a little more exciting, I've made this fuzzy chorus track here. So this is just a duplicate of the chorus, and I've added a bunch of saturation to make it sound super grimy. That sounds like this. And in context with the entire mix here. Let's talk about vocals and panning for a second. In almost every mix I've ever done, my main vocal is right down the center. Then when it comes time to mix in the harmony, usually never dead center. I like to have them off to the sides a little bit or a lot of bit, like listening to a choir in a live performance. All of the singers are spaced out and you get this big wall of sound coming at you. Imagine if they were just standing single file singing at you. Let's listen to this main vocal line and the harmony. And just to show you what I'm talking about, I've got the harmony in mono.
Taking its toll and I don't want you around.
Now let's listen with the harmony in stereo panned.
Taking its toll and I don't want you around.
Can you hear how much more space that gave us, not having the vocals stacked on top of each other, rather spaced throughout the mix? So that's really all I've done with these vocal mixes. I found a good EQ, compression, and saturation setting. I found some reverbs and delays that work well with them. I've shown you what I've done making that delay come in or adding a tail reverb on the end of certain phrases. And I've just gone through the whole song and made it sound exciting using automation. You've now seen the entire production process step by step, start to finish. And the only thing we have left to do is master the song. I know that this song sounds really great through these headphones. The job of a mastering engineer is to make sure this song sounds good on any playback system. So it sounds good on your headphones, on your speakers, in the car, everywhere. We have a few different options when choosing a mastering engineer. We could hire a professional mastering engineer. We could use one of these online services and your track is mastered by a computer, or I could master it myself. I think there's a time and a place for each of these options. Someone just starting out producing music Maybe they've just done a few mixes and they decide they want one mastered, but they don't want to put a lot of money into it. They could use one of these online services. They're super cheap. They're not going to give you nearly as good of a result as a professional mastering engineer, but it will get your track sounding a little louder, maybe a little tighter. I will also master a song time to time, occasionally, but I am not in a mastering room. I don't have proper speakers in this setup at the moment. It would not be wise for me to master a track here. So for this song, we are definitely going to hire a professional mastering engineer. We got the mastered version of Letting You Go back a few days ago, and it sounds really good. I think the mastering engineer did a great job. It still sounds like the mix that I made, and it sounds good on every playback system I have, so we're really happy with it. Thanks for following along, and I hope you guys learned something from these videos. And if you have any more questions, hit us up in the comments. You can DM us on social media if you like. There will be links in the description. And stay tuned because this song drops November 29th, and we're stoked for you guys to hear it.